Place APM. I'm David Brancaccio with our morning report. From APM American Public Media.
AARP Florida believes that volunteering is a meaningful way to give back to the community and get involved. To make a difference and volunteer with AARP, details are at aarp.org/flvolunteer. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Federal Judge James Boasberg is criticizing the Trump administration. He says it gave a, quote, woefully insufficient response to his orders in a case involving the Alien Enemies Act. NPR's Jimena Bustillo reports he is seeking more information about the deportation flights of hundreds of Venezuelan migrants last weekend.
Boasberg had issued an emergency order to temporarily block President Trump's use of the wartime authority known as the Alien Enemies Act to quickly deport people. But some planes carrying hundreds of people still flew to El Salvador. Boasberg is seeking details about the government's compliance with his order. In a filing, a regional immigration and customs official said that cabinet secretaries are considering whether to refuse to provide evidence in the court case on grounds that it's information that could harm national security or foreign relations. Boasberg ordered the government to explain any discussions regarding this matter, known as invoking the privilege of state secrets, and to decide whether to invoke such privilege by March 25th. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News.
Federal safety officials say that for years the state of Maryland failed to check the Francis Scott Key Bridge near Baltimore. Parts of it collapsed last year after an enormous cargo ship collided with the bridge, killing 6 people. The National Transportation Safety Board says as bridges have gotten older, ships have gotten a lot bigger, and government authorities have failed to take extra precautions. From member station WYPR, Scott Massioni reports the NTSB says the Baltimore area bridge isn't the only one that needed to be reviewed.
It also identified 68 other bridges across the country that weren't built to the needs and specifications. NTSB is strongly urging those bridge owners right now to conduct assessments, to report back to the NTSB with remediation plans. And those bridges, they span from California to Washington to New York. They're all over the United States.
Scott Massioni reporting. European Union leaders have agreed at a summit to keep up the pressure on Russia to end its war on Ukraine. Terry Schultz reports on some disagreements.
EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas failed to get enough support for her proposed €40 billion assistance package for Ukraine. So she's adapted that to trying to provide 2 million artillery shells worth €5 billion. Kallas spoke at the EU's latest summit focused on defense investment.
Let's decide on the short term, which is the imminent needs that Ukraine has regarding the ammunition right now.
Leaders debated European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's readiness plan, which includes EU loans to countries buying weapons from European manufacturers.
It is of utmost importance that we develop the defense industrial base in the European Union.
That's part of the bloc's urgent efforts to reduce security dependence on the U.S. For NPR News, I'm Terry Schultz in Brussels.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's now 9:04. St. Johns County's main library reopens at 10 in the morning on Monday following a 2-month-long roof replacement. The community has been using the Anastasia Island and Southeast branches while the main branch was closed. The library will resume its regular services and hours at Monday's reopening, while materials checked out from this location prior to the February closure will be due on Tuesday, April 1st. A bill that would require public elementary school students in Florida to learn cursive has passed its second committee in the State House. Republican State Representative Toby Overdorf, who introduced the bill, says cursive is not only useful in the classroom, but also in everyday life.
We must not lose sight of the foundational skills that connect us to our history and that sharpen our minds. If our students can't read cursive, they can't read the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, or even a grandparent's handwritten letter. Cursive writing isn't just a skill, it's a link to our heritage and a tool for lifelong learning.
Under Overdorf's bill, 2nd to 5th grade students would be required to learn how to write in cursive and prove proficiency in both writing and reading it. The bill has a companion bill in the Senate. It's going to be a chilly day here in Northeast Florida, but we will have sunny skies. Highs will be in the mid-60s, and we'll have breezy conditions as well. Clear skies tonight. Temperatures will remain in the 60s for your Friday evening plans, then drop into the upper 50s after sunset. Eventually, lows will be in the lower 40s by sunrise.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Wallace Foundation, an independent, nonpartisan research foundation collaborating with grantees and partners in the arts, school leadership, and youth development. More at wallacefoundation.org. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Opinions expressed on the First Coast Connect Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and it's Friday, which means it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. Among our topics, local lawmakers hope to bring Trump-era policies to the First Coast, including a local immigration crackdown. A decision by leaders in Fernandina Beach's rejecting a bioethanol plant could be undermined in Tallahassee. Historic LaVilla gets national historic recognition, and the conspiracy theories meet modern-day science with some bills in Tallahassee. To talk about all that and more, I'm joined by Dan Scanlan, reporter at WJCT News. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning.
Obi Umunna, attorney and political consultant. Good morning, Obi.
Good morning.
And Sylvia Perry, editor at the Jacksonville Free Press. Good morning, Sylvia.
Good morning, Ann.
Let's start, if we can, with a meeting Tuesday. We heard public comments for the first time in a standing room only meeting to discuss Duval DOGE. Obi, catch us up a little bit on just kind of what the conceit is here. This is something being proposed by Council Member Ron Salem.
Yeah, I mean, Ron Salem has put together a committee to kind of look at, similar to what's happening in the national and state, to look at government efficiency. And so I think we'll listen to the clip, but I think it's a little bit different than some of the other committees that we've seen, and how effective it will be, we'll have to see. So.
Yeah, we do have some sound from that meeting. There were, as we said, it was a packed meeting. About 25 people spoke. Only 2 supported it. Let's kind of hear some flavor from the comments they got.
Where was all of this when Mayor Curry was in? Y'all didn't bring up none of this when he was in office.
Listen, I'm going to clear this room if y'all continue to demonstrate.
DOGE is a misnomer, catchy misnomer for let's see what we can take away from the working class.
Is this for your political gain? Because if there's not efficiency in the finances, isn't that your responsibility?
It is the buzzword of the hour, but the supposed efficiency is not there. It's not substantiated. It's actually make-believe propaganda, as we are now finding out.
I would urge all of you to think twice about what you're doing. I'm sorry. You're turning this country into another Russia.
I was a Republican for the vast majority of my life, and I believed in Republican policies and conservative thought. I don't believe in the Republican Party as it exists today because they have abandoned those thoughts.
Sylvia, why are we hearing such organized pushback on this concept?
I think, number one, it's stemming down from how DOGE got to come in the first place. And that is with Elon Musk in the nation's capital, cutting jobs, cutting policies, etc. So it automatically has a stigma attached to it. Then when you get down on a local level and a councilman establishes a committee exclusively of one party, it automatically sends a message of not only are you carrying that stigma, but exclusionary processes as well. And Jacksonville is just as scared as the rest of America at this point.
And as you say, this is a committee that is made up entirely of Republicans. There are no Democrats on this.
Correct.
And so that was one of the things that they did hear about.
Yes, and that was reflected with the comments as well. I mean, and it's bipartisan or not, those that are concerned about our city do want a reflective committee,
Yeah.
and that's not being shared.
Dan, I know that Councilmember Salem has, defended this effort. He says it is needed. There are huge budget deficits looming, and he wants to address that fact. But he was asked by a reporter whether he rejected or whether he regretted, linking this effort to that very notorious moniker.
And he seemed to say, no, he didn't regret it, that he didn't mind it being used that way. And he also stated this would not be a federal DOGE kind of project. This would be a little more surgical, and we would bring in no one outside, referring to Mr. Musk. So we shall see. The bottom line is the only lone voice who was invited in, the only Democrat, was Jimmy Peluso, who basically said at the start of the meeting, I hope this fails. I hope it crashes and burns, I think was his exact words. And then later, Salem said, we don't want to invite people like him because he may not be really interested in working on this DOGE project. So it was a very, very contentious meeting. 25 people, 27 people spoke out, and only 2 were in favor, one saying this was good for more transparency in government.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the problem with this is that it just looks bad on its face, right? I think maybe the intentions may be there, but if you look at it, it's only Republicans on the committee. They're not looking at the 2 biggest parts of the Jacksonville city budget, which is police and fire. If you're looking for efficiency, you would look at everything. And then, to be honest, Mayor Deegan is already doing a lot of efficiency work with her Lean 904, which, if you look that up, they've saved over millions of dollars in the efficiency work that they're already doing. And it seems like it's kind of like you're committing a committee to duplicate other sources, other kind of services, and that doesn't seem very efficient. But I think on this face, it just doesn't look like legit, and I think that's where you're getting so much pushback.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about the headlines of the week with our panel of journalists and media analysts. You can join our conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also watch our live stream on YouTube or Facebook. We have a call from Tom on the west side. Good morning, Tom. Go ahead.
Good morning to y'all, too. Just wanted to say that if they're looking for efficiency and fiscal responsibility, they need to look at themselves, because I won't give you the whole list, but we know that they've already funded the stadium, and they've got a long list of expensive projects going all the way through to the potential new jail, and convention center. This is just beyond the ability of the city to afford, and they need to trim the budget and start living within their means. Also, you mentioned police and fire. It seems like the aviation unit could be a bit redundant, so maybe they do want to look at that. Anyway, that's what I have to say. Thank you so much for hearing me out.
Thank you, Tom. We also have a call from Mike on the south side. Good morning, Mike. Go ahead.
Disingenuous that Ron Salem, I found it very disingenuous that Ron Salem's talking about being efficient, and yet he openly laughed at Mayor Deegan's efficiency efforts on Twitter. Why would he do that? That doesn't make any sense if he's really after efficiency. It looks like he's just trying to damage her politically. Thanks.
Thank you, Sylvia. Certainly there are some people that interpret all of this as political, regardless of what side of the issue that you're on. There are, as Obi says, entire parts of the budget that are inviolate, will not be even looked at for efficiencies, including basically every public safety effort, funding for fire, police.
Exactly. So it's why are you even here? Part of the different aspects that Salem says he will be looking at includes analyzing credit, how the government facilities are used, including such basic services as libraries. I mean, since when are libraries in question? How much money is being spent on children's services, et cetera. So when people think about cuts to any of those, it becomes traumatic. And as Obi shared, Lean 904 has already been in place. It's been award winning. And this is way before the DOGE concept even came into place. So when you have a city politician who's already shared that he would be considering a mayoral run, it seems like a personal attack and a way to get attention.
What about job losses? I mean, that is something that, given the deficits that are ahead for this government with revenues that are, clearly going to be lower than expected, Dan, that's
Well,
something that they'll consider, I guess.
with thousands of federal employees now being fired, even though some have been told to go back to work, I can't wait to see what the unemployment figures are nationwide coming up soon. Don't forget that the governor also wants to do a DOGE kind of effort. So there could be some job losses statewide. And then, yeah, you close a library, you close a community center, maybe you're talking 4 staff members total. I don't think that's a lot of money being saved in the long run. That's just an opinion. There have been efforts to close some libraries that have not had good readership numbers in the past decade. So again, that's just resurrecting something that's been attempted before.
We've got a call from Steve at the Beaches. Good morning, Steve. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to say that one of the journalists said, well, there may be some good in this. I don't see any good in it. I think that Ron Salem and his sidekick, Roy Diamond, who at every turn are hounding our Mayor Deegan with anything they can throw at her. And now they're trying to, and obviously Ron Salem is running for mayor. We, on the ground, we know that. And he's doing anything he can to connect with the Trump regime and make him look like a real doer in local government, which all he is an irritant.
Thanks for your thoughts, Steve. It's obviously an issue that will be sticking around, and we will continue to be covering it. If you're just joining us, I'm talking to Dan Scanlan, Sylvia Perry, and Obi Umunna about the week's biggest headlines. Join our conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I want to move on now to a story of what's happening in Fernandina Beach. Recently, a local decision to prohibit a bioethanol manufacturing plant in the center of downtown. That was in February. And then just last Friday, a proposal from Tallahassee from a lawmaker that could upend that decision for the people who live there. Dan Scanlan, this is a complicated issue, so let's take it just bit by bit if we can. The production of ethanol is what's at issue here, the definition of what that constitutes. What's happening here?
Well, Rayonier operates one of the 2 paper mills in the Fernandina area. You can actually see it from downtown. It's off to one side. They're a wood and pulp mill, but they want to do bioethanol manufacturing, and they have stated on their website, they have a website on it, that it's an alternative to fossil fuel based gasoline. It'll help sustain 300 local jobs. And they also, in their lawsuit, state that it is almost a brewery process, akin to making beer or yogurt, and not a chemical manufacturing.
That's a lawsuit responding to the city's refusal to allow this bioethanol plant.
And the city's the City Commission's February 6th decision was based on the fact that their comprehensive plan says that you cannot have chemical manufacturing in the area. That, of course, now is in question because Senator McCain of Ocala has filed an amendment to his bill on agricultural land planning that would state that it is not manufacturing. And that came up at a committee meeting this week, which had some serious debate.
The bioethanol manufacturing is not chemical.
Its fermentation is what is now being claimed by Rayonier, as well as in the amendment saying that this is not a chemical process.
So we should be clear, Rayonier has now spun off. So RYAM is what the company goes by now. I think Rayonier is just more its specific timber function. But so why does this matter to folks in Fernandina Beach? I mean, this is a lot of people there have been opposing this manufacturing facility. The city's comprehensive plan, as you say, prohibits chemical manufacturing. So what has been the reaction to this amendment?
The concern is pollution into the Amelia River. The concern is having something that's potentially explosive being manufactured literally near downtown, and also the fact that the only way in and out is 8th Street up onto the state road, and that means tanker trucks with this in whatever form would be transported through residential areas and then along the only line in and out of Fernandina Beach through Yulee to I-95. So there are concerns about that, even as late as their Tuesday night commission meeting where there was discussion about the dangers of it.
So, Obi, the lawmaker that's proposing this, as Dan said, is Senator Stan McClain. He's from Ocala. He has no connection to the community. And this measure, this amendment, which was introduced Friday, was then voted on Monday with approval from the Senate's Community Affairs Committee, 5-3. Is that unusual in the way that Tallahassee operates?
Not really. I mean, lobbyists find their way to who they need to find to get what they need across, and I'm sure there was a lobbyist from that company that knew that they could get to this committee and they could do it that way. I think that's typical with Tallahassee politics, is that you find who you need to help you out. What I think isn't typical is, and we don't know if he was there at the time, but the representative from Fernandina was in the committee, and we didn't get any. I don't know if he was there when this conversation was happening, but there was an opportunity to kind of speak on it, and that happened by representatives from South Florida that actually pressed this rep about what was actually happening and how this would change, and really how it would change a local rule as well. And I think this is an interesting kind of policy between local and state governments and oversight and all that, but it's clear that the local government and the people there don't want this there. And so we're now seeing a way, in my opinion, but I think in the opinion of some of the people as well, that this is a way to get around what they want.
And as you said, there were some lawmakers pressuring Senator McClain for some answers. Let's hear that exchange from that committee meeting on Monday.
So I received about 150 calls on this piece of legislation so far, and I know I've received some calls from some individuals who live in Fernandina Beach and individuals who live in Amelia Island, and heard from both sides, Republicans and Democrats, who have expressed their opposition to the potential of their fear of ethanol plants being built next to private homes. Are we not concerned? Are we not taking into consideration those concerns from those individuals? I guess what I'm trying to ask.
I don't know the particulars of that particular process or project and where it's located. I think what we wanted to do was to be able to define ethanol production and how it takes place and how it can take place.
And so, Obi, not necessarily addressing the concerns about the residents' complaints.
Right. I mean, I think it's clear that this is an opportunity to define something in a way that makes it easier for them to pass, right? I think him saying that he's unaware of it is probably true because he's not from the area, but I think there is obviously a reason for this, and he probably understands that. But at this point, I think it's clear what this is going to do. I think it's unfortunate that, as Senator Jones said, that he's heard from Republicans and Democrats that don't want this, and I think it's clear that the community doesn't want this. I think it's one, and you would think that is what would happen.
Yeah. I want to take a call from Medardo Monzon. Medardo has been on this program a couple of times to discuss this. He's a retired chemist and a Fernandina Beach resident. He provided technical support for citizens opposing the project. Good morning, Medardo.
Good morning, Anne. Thanks for taking the call.
Thank you for calling. I wonder if you can sort of explain to people, since you do have a chemistry background, what the difference is between labeling something a chemical manufacturing operation, which, the permit request for this project identifies this bioethanol plant as, and a fermentation process.
Yes. And according to the American Chemical Society, chemical manufacturing involves transforming raw materials into new substances by using chemical reactions and chemical process. A chemical reaction occurs when the chemical bonds of a substance are broken or rearranged, such as when sugars are transformed into ethanol, as the proposed legislation states. Furthermore, ethanol refining requires using distillation, which is the main chemical process used to separate liquids in chemical manufacturing. Therefore, unquestionably, the industrial production of ethanol from biomass is chemical manufacturing and refining. Additionally, There is no chemical difference between so-called bioethanol and ethanol. The prefix bio is simply used to denote that the process used is fermentation, which is a subcategory, and I would like to underline that, is simply a subcategory of chemical manufacturing as noted in the standard industrial codes that we use in our country to identify economic activity, I believe, since 1937. So this is really well known, and it's preposterous what they're trying to do here, redefining what the American Chemical Society and what the standard industrial codes say.
So, what is the concern at this point about learning about this amendment? What has the community's reaction been? What has the city's reaction been?
Yeah, well, the opposition continues, and the opposition is based, as one of your roundtable persons say, the hazards in an island community whose economy is based on tourism. And it is clear that producing a highly flammable material at a site which already processes very large quantities of very hazardous materials would cause here. So the opposition in the community continues. There's effort to reach the other committees to see if we can have this amendment removed from the legislation, the proposed legislation, before it goes to the floor.
And we know that the closest lawmaker I think that was on that committee is Tom Leek. He's a Republican who represents St. Johns County. He voted in favor of this redefinition of what ethanol production is. What about your own local lawmakers? Are you hearing anything from them?
No, we haven't heard anything, which is surprising. I watched the meeting via video, and State Senator Yarborough, who's our state senator, was there. He was there to support one of the bills that he was sponsoring, so he must have received a packet of information for the whole meeting. So it's really inexcusable the fact that he remained silent on an issue that he well knows, because we have been fighting this for over a year, that this is important to our community. It is sort of remarkable that State Representative Black is also silent on the issue. What we're going to try to do is really prompt a Nassau County legislative meeting with both State Senator Yarborough and State Representative Black before this legislation goes to the floor.
Thanks, Medardo. Dan.
Well, I did have some communication with the city manager, Sarah Campbell, just as this occurred, and she said that she did not think that the amendment filed by McLean applies, quote, in our situation. She says the section of statutes in this applies is specific to agricultural zone lands. Then there was a presentation made by her at the commission meeting, and they agreed to fund the defense of the lawsuit by RYAM against them, and apparently one of the list of legislative items that they will be reviewing through the April 1st meeting is this bill, Senate Bill 1118. So they are aware of it, but they don't believe the way it's amended that it deals with what they're doing. But again, you got a lawsuit that says the opposite, and I believe that's a $4 million lawsuit against the city of Fernandina Beach.
And we should say we've talked to the folks at RYAM a couple of times as we've covered this over the last several months, and they say that this project would be good for the community, and they believe that they have sufficiently addressed potential dangers that it might pose. We do not know in any direct way that the folks at RYAM are behind this amendment. We want to take a call now from Sandy in Fernandina Beach. Good morning, Sandy. Go ahead.
Good morning. I am very much concerned about this legislation. I think it does pertain, I think it was exactly put in there to to redefine, as Medardo mentioned, chemical manufacturing. There's no other plausible reason why that would have been stuck into that bill at the last minute on Friday with the committee voting the following Monday. This is extremely dangerous process that they're proposing that would be hazardous. And I don't know if you're familiar with one that happened recently, a few months back in Conyers, Georgia, that shut down that entire city, and there was a stay-in-place order for all the citizens for many, many miles away. So this is just the wrong thing on a 13-mile long island. Citizens have been opposed to it for over a year, fighting it. And I think RYAM is fighting it on the legal battle with the city, But knowing there's no guarantee that they would prevail in that, I think they've gone around the legal and going to the legislature. I think if people take a closer look at the campaign contributions made to some of the senators and representatives involved in this on these committees, they might see a reason for their favoring voting this.
Sandy, thanks much for your call. I appreciate it. We're going to move on now to some other issues before the legislature. It is obviously full swing season in Tallahassee right now. The topic of book bans, Sylvia, is something that I think, has been cropping up. A lot of people thought perhaps its best days were behind us, but there is a new proposal that would basically disallow school districts from considering a book's artistic or literary value when they're banning books. Can you explain to us a little bit about, what the significance of that requirement would be, how that might change the debate that already is happening in schools?
We've already had a number of classical books that have been banned, and now it appears that they want to place further restraints on there and to limit exactly what our students can read. I mean, as opposed to the classics of the Toni Morrison and previous Pulitzer Prize winning authors that have now been taken out of our books based on the state. The school districts wanted to, not the school districts, but the school districts would have had more say-so as to what their students actually read. Now they want to eliminate that and make it strictly based on state's guidelines.
Yeah. And Obi, this is, a kind of teeing off on a 2023 rule that said that, school boards are allowed to remove books if parents challenge them as pornographic. But there was this carve out if these books were deemed to have literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, that school districts could consider that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to say I'm a proud, Duval County Public School. I went to Stanton High School, and in the course of education, you have different types of books, right? That are there, and the Odyssey, and different books that are part of the classical education, right? And I think what the school boards were trying to do was to try to reserve those particular pieces of content for the kids. And I think it's unfortunate now that we are moving into this type of society where I think the teachers are not given and the school board are not given a little bit of thought into how they're trying to teach these kids. I think, I am. It's very clear here what they are trying to do in taking these books out. But I think what should happen is be more concerned about the education of the kids, right? You see the SAT scores in Florida dropping. You've seen education in Florida has not been where it needs to be. And I think it's partly because we're trying to take the curriculum out of the hands of the teachers and put them into state bureaucrats. And I think we have to really, hopefully this doesn't pass and that school boards can have a little bit of a say into what they're teaching their kids.
And I'd also add with that, and you're taking it out, as Obi said, and putting it in the hands of politicians. And that's like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Somebody also shared that if you take context of the Bible, Song of Solomon, it could be viewed as pornographic. So where does the division between church and state really lie?
Sure. I mean, there are some pretty terrible stories in the Bible, Dan, and that's something that did come up at this meeting. Context is important, and that's why this carve out, I think, for a lot of people evaluating these books mattered, because if the book does have significant literary value, that perhaps some objectionable content that might otherwise, out of context, be inappropriate might be considered acceptable.
I think all of us are here doing what we're doing right now because we got to read some really intriguing stuff in school. Slaughterhouse-Five was on. Many books were on my high school reading curriculum that would not be allowed today. It allowed me to think outside the box a bit, which is one thing that made me a journalist. I think you are dumbing down. I think the SAT scores are showing dumbing down. And if you can't give high school kids, again, I'm not talking younger kids, high school kids, the ability to go hunt down something, then they stop reading. Maybe I'm just thinking doomsday here, but I think right now, if you're reading only off your phone, that's not logical. Pick up a book and learn.
Florida has more banned books than any other state in the union. I mean, it's like, how much further are we going to actually gut our education system?
Another bill that was sort of catching the headlines this week was a bill that addresses what has traditionally been viewed as a conspiracy theory, the idea that there are chemtrails being left in the sky to some sort of nefarious purpose. This bill would kind of include that concern and offer people who are concerned about such things, Dan, an opportunity to report their concerns to the Department of Environmental Protection.
I don't know what to make of this. I mean, I look up and I see a contrail. I just think that's a place I'd like to be going on that jetliner to Paris or something. I don't ever think that it's some nefarious secret government seeding of the clouds to cause my brain to go strange. And it is conspiracy theory. The only time I ever think of seeding anything is you and I were talking earlier about seeding clouds to produce rain, which they do in some of the more desert climates in the West Coast. And that was never deemed as being a government conspiracy. That was deemed as necessary to make my crops grow. I don't know what to make of this, and I don't know where it's coming from.
So, Obi, that is one element, and this lawmaker says she's responding to constituent concerns. She's been hearing that people are fearful of these chemtrails. But part of this bill would also address some very real developments in the world of technology,
Right.
what known sort of more broadly as geoengineering.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that we have moved in a place in our science that we can obviously do some things with what people may call cloud seeding or whatever that is. And I think this bill is interesting. I honestly was not aware that this had gone this far to get to this point where there's a bill. I looked at some of the committee notes from when they discussed it, and I think it's interesting that this is moving forward because I think a lot of the conspiracy stuff was brought up, but for the sake of just moving the bill forward, it was moved forward, and I think we'll have to see. I honestly don't see much coming from this. I don't see how you're going to like report it and how you're going to prove that this is actually happening, and I think that's what's been the hardest part about the conspiracy part about it. It's hard to like get up there and see what's actually happening because you don't have proof of it. So we'll see. I think that's what the beauty of government is, though, is that you can if you have a concern, you can bring it to your legislator, and then it will now be a bill. But we'll have to see. I'm really interested to see how far this bill actually goes, with all the other really important things that Florida needs to deal with this particular session, and so we'll see where that goes. But I really don't really think that this is a high priority for Florida right now. So.
Yeah. I want to talk now, if we can, about LaVilla, the historic neighborhood of LaVilla. Sylvia, this is a part of the city that has more recently been, I think, embraced and recognized by city leaders, but obviously has a very rich history as the oldest neighborhood in the city, LaVilla.
Yes, LaVilla does. I mean, it's anyone from Jacksonville is familiar with LaVilla. You may not know of its heyday, which stems from the early 1900s, all the way until around 1990. I think that's when the Ritz LaVilla and Museum opened. After then, it started to see a sharp decline with the rest of the gentrification. All of the beautiful two-story houses started to either fall to absentee landlord or being torn down. And it's such a rich legacy there. Everything from the Prime Osborne Convention Center, you still have the Clara White Mission, you still have the Globe Theater and the Masonic Lodge. And this is a location where everyone from the mayor's great-great-grandfather used to have a store to Billie Holiday and Count Basie used to grace the streets performing here in Jacksonville. And now it's just a shell. But now with the recent revitalization, we have the James Weldon Johnson Park, the Shands Hospital is coming back there. This is an opportunity for the city to have the tax resources to be reinvested back into the community and add to our downtown. So it's an absolutely great honor. They've been working on it. It's another 6 months of a two-phase process that needs to take place, and we're all rooting for LaVilla.
Yeah. I mean, it has been through a lot. It's interesting, Obi, because this push to have this historic designation would put some restrictions on what could be changed or modified or torn down. the city supports that, but that does come after many years of the city itself doing a lot of tearing down.
I mean, I think LaVilla is a super important part of the city's history, but also culture, right? And I think you have seen it kind of being torn down and not taken as seriously as it needs to be. And it's exciting to see that the city's now putting some effort into building it back up. And I think, what we saw with the announcement this week and what we hope to come here is an actually revitalization of this area, and hopefully a bringing back the culture and what made this area so special. But also this area, in a lot of ways, if you talk about people, entertainers that came to town, this area put Jacksonville on the map a lot of times with the kind of black entertainers that would come
Chitlin
through.
Circuit.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Chitlin Circuit
Yeah.
that would come through LaVilla. And so it's an important part of Jacksonville's history.
The sad part is the Ritz Theater that we have now is a facade. The actual theater existed through the 1980s. There was a fire, and there was a hole in the roof. No one ever fixed the hole, and the whole interior just deteriorated and had to be torn down. If we get this designation, those existing buildings from the historic Stanton High School to the Clara White Mission, which was actually a theater, those would have to stay as they are. They can only be modified with permission. And we have a large number of national historic sites in the city that are there because someone thought to save them.
I mean, you have been around as a reporter long enough to remember, though, the River City Renaissance, which under Mayor Ed Austin primarily, removed most of the people that lived in LaVilla, removed most of the homes that remained in LaVilla, and basically created a landscape for new investment, but got rid of much of the history.
Look around the Ritz Theater complex. There's still lots of empty spots between that and the LaVilla School. Running up and down the Genovar Hall was supposed to be renovated. It is now just a shell surrounded by a fence. A lot of stuff that should have happened to preserve LaVilla, as you said, has either been torn down or just never happened. This is a chance to do that. Obviously, lift every voice and sing park. Some of the other efforts with UF coming in will bring new life to LaVilla, and the history will be part of that. I would envision somewhere we get a performing arts center in there that complements the school.
Yeah. The reality is, if they do get this historic designation, of course, it does become more difficult to do changes, to do renovations. So the people that remain there, whether it's the Clara White Mission or anybody that's working on the Prime Osborne, I mean, it comes with perhaps a lot more investment required to make those changes, Sylvia.
Well, the sad part is few buildings left that are actually there. Thank goodness for some preservationists some years ago that fought to save, like the Shack House,
The
Shotgun
Shack.
House,
Mhm.
and Brewster Hospital, but they've been moved from their original location. But at least we still have those structures. So it's few remaining structures, but the spirit lives on, and I think it can definitely be fulfilling for Jacksonville.
Yeah, I think I've seen like as many as 500 buildings were removed from there, and certainly
Yes, in 30 years.
yeah.
Yeah. But I will say, I think even though it does make it a little bit harder, this is a kind of a stake in the ground to actually start to move some of these projects forward that I don't think we had before. It allows some tax kind of credits and some things that are making it easier for people to come in and do the work. And I think this is for the first time will be an emphasis on doing the development right in the historic view instead of just the economic view. It's an opportunity to really make sure that the history doesn't go anywhere.
A win-win.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dan, I mean, this would unlock, I guess, as much as 20% federal tax credits for rehabilitating structures. So while it might cost more, there could be some federal incentives to make repairs.
And we have seen, like UF right now, apparently they're looking for even more property to use. There is development occurring there. Again, having been here for 45 years and the riverfront was dead for 30 of those years, we're finally seeing it. It takes time. LaVilla, though, I would love to be able to go and hear some good classic blues at somewhere there and remember the Chitlin Circuit when that was the Harlem of the South.
Yeah. Well, Dan Scanlan, Sylvia Perry, Obi Umunna, thank you all so much for being here today. Have a great Friday.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, meet the man versus the man. We'll tell you about a standoff between an urban farmer and the city. Welcome back. Well, he's known for his signature overalls and his passion for fresh local produce. I'm joined by urban farmer Nathan Ballantyne. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we say you are the man in overalls. You're, in fact, wearing some overalls today. I think you generally do. Where did the whole man in overalls concept come from?
Originally from my grandfather. He wore overalls every day of his life, and he was actually buried in overalls.
Oh.
But then as I was trying to figure out how do you do marketing to talk about urban farming and helping people start gardens, I actually came up with the idea of a sign that said, "We'll garden for food," and I stood beside the road. And before I did that, I thought, well, how could I make that image better, And there, sitting in the back of my head, was overalls.
So there was a lot to talk about the work that you do and some events that are coming up. But I want to sort of start our conversation talking about this standoff you've had just recently with the city over a plot of land, one of a few properties that you own and farm in the urban core. Can you tell us what happened?
Sure, and I wouldn't call it a standoff so much as a gray zone, and as a figuring out. We're developing a third farm in Springfield. The first one was in my backyard, and the second one was in the side yard of a local business. And the third one, we acquired property because we had an extensive wait list. We have a wait list now with over 400 people.
For your subscription?
For our subscription, yeah. It's a
produce.
subscription you pick. So people pay a monthly fee like Netflix, and then they get access to our space. And with that, they get access to have their own events, but also to pick veggies and herbs and fruit. And that wait list has vastly outgrown our rate of farm development. But of course, we're proceeding with that, and so we acquired this property on 7th Street, right behind the Sanctuary on 8th Street. And the difference is that we don't have a primary residence or a business on that lot. So for decades, actually, urban farming has existed in the city of Jacksonville, but it's been in this gray zone where it's existed as a ancillary use, right, as an accessory use. And so the city has said things like, well, we can't say you can do what you want to do, but we can't tell you you can't do it. Right? So it's just this gray zone. And so what I think that is happening right now is because we're trying to start a farm on a piece of property and have it be explicitly a neighborhood farm destination, whether we call that a private club or a central service or what have you. We're trying to figure out what that looks like for the city so that others who come after us can follow that template, because even the chief health officer in the mayor's office is touting the positive health outcomes that come with urban farming in terms of reduced obesity, improved diabetes scores, and things like this, not to mention improved loneliness and what have you. But there's not really a route for urban farmers who say, hey, I'm going to acquire property and I want to start doing this so that I can better feed my community. That template doesn't exist yet in our city. It does in Atlanta. It does in many other cities, but we don't have that framework yet.
Because of that, I know that you received a sort of warning citation from the city about this property. We're going to have to take a little break. We'll come back in 2 minutes with more about what's going on and what your next steps are.
Thank you.
DuPont Counseling Group is a team of therapists, psychiatrists, and counselors available to help with life's mental health challenges. Everyone needs help sometimes. More information can be found at jacksonvillecounseling.org. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. One text or call can wreck it all. Learn more through distracted driving presentations for teens and the workforce. Arrive alive. Let's end distracted driving.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
On the next Florida Roundup, lawmakers are considering a bill to study the impact if property taxes were eliminated. The money paid by property owners is money used by local governments and school districts. Local police, teachers, fire departments are all paid with property taxes. If you own a home or condo, would you like to see your property tax bill disappear? If it does, how would you pay for local parks and schools? Email us radio@thefloridaroundup.org. I'm Tom Hudson. Then join us Friday noon until 1.
I'm just a sweet transvestite.
50 years ago, a kinky spoof of horror films opened on Broadway and quickly bombed. But it also was adapted into a film, which became a cult classic. On the next Fresh Air, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Rocky Horror Picture Show with the film's star, Tim Curry. And we remember the best-selling sports writer John Feinstein. Join us.
Today at 1 on WJCT News 89.9.
Days after a battle over how and whether to fund the government, a new fight breaks out among Democrats.
I think you caved. I don't think you showed the fight that this party needs right now.
No one wants to fight more than me. You got to fight smart.
Also on the roundup, Republican efforts to impeach judges draws a rare rebuke from the Supreme Court Chief Justice, and a boardroom bust-up at Ben & Jerry's leaves many with a bad taste.
Today starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, I am here with Nathan Ballantyne, so-called man in overalls, catching us up on the issue of urban farming and kind of where that falls right now into a gray area with the city of Jacksonville. This is stemming from a Facebook post that you made after you got a citation from the city code compliance division. Can you tell us why you were cited, what it said, and what the concern was?
Sure. So that the citation said I had 30 days or something to get a certificate of use. I originally applied for a certificate of use as a private club last spring, and was denied on the grounds that the piece of property is not quite large enough to fit the definition of a private club. It turns out that a lot has to be 1 acre to have a private club, and our farm is 2/3 of an acre. So then I was poised to reapply, but in talking with the Office of Agriculture, Angela Tinbrook, she said, look, you are a farm. You have the right to farm in the state of Florida. State law supersedes the city law, and so you can proceed. And so I did. Also, there were some murmurings in the neighborhood. By and large, we've had tremendous support. Every day that I'm on that property, neighbors stop by and say, it looks good, so excited, can't wait, and things like this. But there were a few folks to the contrary in the neighborhood, and they didn't want what they called, quote, the bad precedent of us being able to have a certificate of use as a private club, because they said, quote, if you could have a farm as a private club, quote, you could do anything with a private club in the neighborhood. And I thought, well, I don't know if that's true or not, but certainly our business model has been a club model since the very beginning. And then we've actually layered on another business model to that effect with gardeners from across the city. So anyhow, it was kind of in limbo, but I did all the requirements in order to engage the Right to Farm Act. And then I heard in mid-February that a memo had been written by the Office of General Counsel to Jimmy Peluso that said, in effect, they didn't believe that the Right to Farm Act had any application in this context. There's precedent around the state to the contrary, but that was their opinion. And so as the general counsel for the city, then that held sway. And I don't know exactly what catalyzed that memo, and I don't know exactly what catalyzed then code enforcement to show up at my door. But they delivered that memo and said, like, you have to comply and get a certificate of use. And I'm fine with that. I just want some direction from the city on what I should be applying for, in terms of the category. There's probably 6 different categories within the zoning that would qualify. But I want that direction because I don't want to do paperwork for no point. So I'm actually meeting with Ashante Green is convening some folks at the city, and we're going to have a sit down next week.
Yeah, we'd asked the city if they had any comment on your circumstance in the citation you received, and they sent us a statement that says, we've reached out to Mr. Ballantyne to set up a meeting with him and various city departments to determine the best path forward and provide support through this process. Mayor Deegan's administration is committed to urban agriculture. We're actively working on building urban farming into daily life in ways the community can support. It's our goal to identify solutions that work for all parties in this specific neighborhood and across the city. By taking this approach, we'll be able to build policies that can be tailored for neighborhoods while encouraging citywide growth in urban agriculture. Um, I want to ask you, though, we have an email from somebody that says, it's my understanding that the farm property is in a historic district, which has special rules with its own zoning overlay and design regulations. I'm pro-urban farms, but they shouldn't be exempt from the zoning or historic district rules. Is that also part of the issue?
Well, I'm fine with that too. I live there. I love the quality of the neighborhood. And what we found in digging into history is that actually one block away from us, in 1903, there was a sandboard map of this extensive florist operation, and they had a greenhouse complex that was almost the size of the entire block. And so anyhow, we're of course leaning into that precedent and saying urban ag has been part of this neighborhood for over 100 years. But I see no reason that what we do shouldn't follow through with some of the historic commission things. Right now, the rules are things that are 30 inches and below are not part of their review system. But when we do permanent structures above that, we of course would go through that process.
So just briefly, I do want to get to some of the community events that you do. You do this monthly Greens and Beans event, which is kind of a potluck and also a tutorial in some ways. Tell us a little bit about that and when the next one is.
Sure. Yeah, our next Greens and Beans is actually tonight. It's at 6 p.m. and it's a monthly it's a monthly chance to break bread together with other folks in the community. We have a chef prepared farm fresh meal. We always have an entertainment piece, and then also the chefs do some culinary education. So it's a chance to gather, and if folks have an idea for improving the community food system, or they just enjoy breaking bread with folks in the community, then it's a good chance to come out.
And is this at the farm in question, this event?
Yeah, I can neither confirm nor deny
Okay.
that.
I do think that the location, though, is East 7th Street if people are interested in it.
Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Ascension St. Vincent's and WJCT present Healthy Hearts and New Starts, Understanding Cardiovascular Health and Weight Loss Surgery with Drs. Cunningham and Bailey, March 25th at WJCT Studios. Event is free, but registration is required at wjct.org/events.
This is WJCT